Welcome back, you night owls. Tonight we step into the flickering torchlight of medieval Europe, where the line between madness and mystery is as blurry as a monk's half-finished manuscript. Picture a muddy village square, the air thick with the scent of damp hay and wood smoke, where a woman with wild eyes mutters to herself, clutching a bundle of herbs like a lifeline. The townsfolk whisper she's touched by spirits, or maybe just touched in the head. Either way, they probably won't survive this. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Drop a comment with your location and local time. I'm curious where you're drifting off to this tale. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The year is 1342, and in a hamlet nestled between rolling hills and a sluggish river, a healer named Agnes crouches beside a fire, her gnarled fingers sorting through a basket of wilted plants. She's the village's go-to for everything from fever to heartbreak. But today's task is trickier. Young Thomas, a blacksmith's apprentice, hasn't spoken in weeks. His eyes dart like trapped sparrows and he flinches at shadows. The villagers call it madness, a word that hangs heavy, like damp wool on a winter morning. Agnes, though, isn't so sure. She mutters about spirits, or perhaps an imbalance in his soul, as she crushes lavender and sage into a paste. Her diagnosis is less science than art, a blend of old wives' tales and half-remembered prayers, but it's all they've got. Mental health in medieval times isn't a phrase anyone uses. The concept, as we know it, is centuries away, like a ship still below the horizon. Instead, people speak of melancholy, possession, or divine punishment. The mainstream historical fact here is that medieval medicine leans heavily on the theory of humorism, inherited from ancient Greece. The body, they believe, is governed by 4 humours: blood, phlegm, yellow bile and black bile, and any imbalance can tip a person into madness. Too much black bile, and you're drowning in despair. Too much yellow, and you're raging like a summer storm. Agnes, like most healers, doesn't read Latin or own a book, but she's absorbed enough from travelling physicians to know Thomas's silence might stem from an excess of melancholy. She brews a tea of Saint John's wort, hoping its sunny yellow petals will coax his spirit back. But here's the quirky tidbit. Some villagers swear Thomas's condition started when he tripped over a fairy ring, a circle of mushrooms said to mark a portal to the spirit world. Agnes rolls her eyes at this, but she's not above tossing a pinch of salt over her shoulder, just in case. Superstition weaves through every diagnosis, as common as fleas in a tavern bed. If the herbs don't work, maybe a charm or a moonlit chant will. The line between medicine and magic is thinner than a spider's thread, and Agnes treads it carefully, knowing a wrong step could brand her a witch. Historians still argue whether these village healers did more harm than good. Some say their remedies, rooted in observation and trial, laid the groundwork for modern herbalism. Others point to the risks, misjudged doses, toxic plants, or rituals that delayed real care. Agnes, for her part, isn't thinking about posterity. She's watching Thomas sip her tea, his hands trembling less than yesterday. Progress, maybe. The village watches too, their whispers a mix of hope and suspicion. Madness to them isn't just a personal affliction, it's a puzzle, a threat, a sign. If Thomas recovers, they'll credit Agnes's skill or God's mercy. If he doesn't, well, there's always the river to wash away their fears. The healer's hut is a cramped affair, its walls hung with drying herbs that sway like sleepy ghosts in the draught. A single candle sputters, casting shadows that dance across Thomas's pale face. Agnes hums a tune, soft and lilting to keep the air from feeling too heavy. It's a trick she learned from her mother, who swore music could soothe a troubled mind. Modern science might back her up. Music therapy's no newfangled idea, but Agnes just knows it feels right. She tells Thomas stories of knights and dragons, hoping to spark a flicker in his eyes. He doesn't speak, but he listens, and that's enough for now. Outside, the village buzzes with its own theories. The baker blames Thomas's condition on a curse from a spurned lover. The miller's wife insists he saw a ghost in the churchyard. Medieval minds don't have the language for trauma or depression, so they fill the gaps with stories. It's not all wrong, though. Trauma's real, even if they call it something else. Maybe Thomas saw something during a late-night forge, or maybe his heart broke when his sister married and left. Agnes doesn't pry. She's not a therapist, just a woman with herbs and hope. Her job is to keep him steady, not to unravel his soul. Here's a light joke to ease the mood. Why did the medieval healer always carry sage? Because she wanted to be wise about spirits. Okay, maybe that one's as old as the hills, but it fits the vibe. The point is, Agnes's work is a balancing act, part nurse, part storyteller, part hedge witch. She's not alone either. Across Europe, women like her, and sometimes men, fill this role. They're the first line of defence against a mind gone astray, armed with plants and prayers instead of diplomas. Their knowledge is oral, passed down like a favourite lullaby, and it's as much about comfort as cure. The village square, meanwhile, is a stage for judgment. Thomas's silence draws stares, and not the kind you'd want. Madness carries a stigma, even now, but back then, it's a scarlet letter woven from fear. A madman might be a prophet, sure, but he's just as likely a danger. The church looms large here, its stone walls promising answers where herbs fall short. The priest, Father Edmund, visits Thomas, sprinkling holy water and muttering Latin. He's kinder than some, who'd call for chains or worse. But kindness doesn't mean understanding. The church sees madness as a spiritual failing, a battle between angels and demons. Agnes, practical as ever, just wants Thomas to eat his porridge. Another joke, because why not? What do you call a medieval healer's favourite herb? Time for a cure? Alright, I'll keep the day job. But seriously, Agnes's remedies are a mix of hope and guesswork. She might steep chamomile for calm or valerian for sleep, but there's no guarantee. Some plants are toxic in the wrong dose. Monkshood, anyone? And Agnes knows the stakes. One wrong move, and she's not just failing Thomas, she's risking her own neck. The village trusts her, but trust is fragile, like a clay pot in a storm. The day fades, and Agnes sits by Thomas, watching the fire die to embers. She wonders if his silence is a choice, a shield against a world too loud. Medieval life is brutal. Plagues, wars, and winters that bite like wolves. A mind could crack under less. She doesn't know about serotonin or therapy, but she knows a warm hand on a shoulder can do wonders. She pats Thomas's arm, her touch as gentle as the ASMR whisper I'm aiming for here. The village sleeps, save for the owls and the restless, and Agnes keeps her vigil, one eye on Thomas, one on the stars. The quirky fairy ring story lingers, though. Some villagers swear they've seen lights dancing in those mushroom circles, and who's to say they're wrong? Maybe Thomas stumbled into something otherworldly, or maybe he's just tired. Either way, Agnes's work is a bridge between the seen and unseen, the body and the soul. She'll try another herb tomorrow, maybe rosemary for memory. For now she hums, the sound soft as moonlight, and hopes it's enough to keep Thomas tethered to the world. The village wakes to a grey dawn, the kind that makes you wonder if the sun overslept. Agnes, bleary-eyed from her vigil with Thomas, trudges through the mist to the marketplace, her basket swinging with fresh herbs. The blacksmith's apprentice is no better today, his silence as stubborn as a locked gate, and whispers of his madness ripple through the crowd like spilled ale. A travelling physician, Master Godfrey, has arrived, his cloak dusted from the road and his satchel bulging with tools that gleam like promises. He's here to examine Thomas, and the villagers hope his learned ways will succeed where Agnes's herbs faltered. Godfrey, with his Latin phrases and parchment charts, believes the key to Thomas's mind lies in the ancient theory of humours, a system that rules medieval medicine like a king's decree. The mainstream historical fact is that humoralism, born from Hippocrates and refined by Galen, dominates how physicians like Godfrey understand the body and mind. They see health as a balance of 4 humours: blood, phlegm, yellow bile and black bile, each tied to a temperament: sanguine, phlegmatic, choleric or melancholic. Thomas's silence, his vacant stares, scream melancholy to Godfrey, a condition caused by too much black bile pooling in his system. The physician's plan is simple but grim: purge the excess humour to restore balance. He prepares a concoction of hellebore, a plant known to induce vomiting, and insists Thomas drink it under the watchful eyes of the village elders. The scene is less clinic, more ritual, with Godfrey muttering about cleansing the spirit as Thomas gags on the bitter brew. But here's the quirky tidbit. Godfrey also checks Thomas's urine, swirling it in a glass flask like a vintner tasting wine. Uroscopy, as it's called, is a medieval obsession, with physicians claiming they can diagnose anything, madness included, by studying a patient's pee. Colour, clarity, even taste, yes, some went that far, supposedly reveal the body's secrets. Godfrey squints at the cloudy liquid, declaring it overly melancholic, which earns a few raised eyebrows from the villagers. Agnes, hovering nearby, hides a smirk. She's never trusted these fancy doctors with their flasks and fuss. Her herbs might not have Latin names, but at least they don't make Thomas retch. Historians still argue whether humoral treatments like purging did more to harm or heal. Some credit physicians for their systematic approach, a precursor to modern diagnostics. Others say the brutal methods, vomiting, bleeding or worse, weakened patients already teetering on the edge. Godfrey, though, is confident, his voice carrying the weight of university training. He orders Thomas to rest in a darkened room, away from the villagers' clamour, believing quiet will soothe his troubled humours. The blacksmith's forge sits silent, its anvil cold, as the apprentice lies on a straw pallet, his breath shallow but steady. Agnes lingers, her scepticism warring with hope. She's seen purges fail before, but maybe this learned man knows something she doesn't. The physician's visit draws a crowd, their faces a mix of awe and fear. Medieval folk don't have words like depression or anxiety, but they know a broken mind when they see one. To them, Thomas's silence is a riddle, maybe a curse, and Godfrey's arrival feels like a knight riding in to slay a dragon. The marketplace buzzes with theories. The miller blames a bad batch of rye bread, hinting at ergot poisoning, a real risk in damp harvests. The baker's wife, ever dramatic, insists Thomas gazed too long at the moon, a surefire way to lose your wits. Godfrey dismisses these tales with a wave, but even he carries a rabbit's foot for luck. Science and superstition share the same bed in this world, tangled like lovers in a hayloft. Let's lighten the mood with a joke. Why did the medieval physician love his job? Because he always got to stir the pot. Okay, that one's as shaky as a three-legged stool, but it fits. Godfrey's tools, leeches, lancets, and that suspicious flask look more like a torturer's kit than a doctor's. He decides to bleed Thomas next, slicing a vein with a blade so sharp it hums. The blood drips into a bowl, dark and sluggish, and Godfrey nods as if it's speaking to him. Bleeding is standard for humoral imbalances, meant to drain excess bile, but to modern ears it sounds like a horror show. Agnes watches, her lips pressed tight. She'd rather trust her chamomile than this bloodletting nonsense, but she holds her tongue. Godfrey's temper is as sharp as his knife. The village church looms in the background, its bell tolling noon like a heartbeat. Father Edmund, the priest, joins the scene, clutching a rosary and eyeing Thomas with pity. The church has its own take on madness, often tying it to sin or demonic influence, but humoralism gives physicians like Godfrey a secular edge. Still, the two worlds overlap. Godfrey mutters a prayer before cutting, and Edmund sprinkles holy water on the blood bowl just in case. It's a team effort, this battle for Thomas's mind, though nobody's sure who's leading. The villagers, caught between faith and fear, clutch charms and cross themselves, hedging their bets. Another joke to keep things cosy. What's a medieval doctor's favourite song? Bile me up before you go-go. All right, I'll stop torturing you. But seriously, Godfrey's methods are torture enough for Thomas, who's pale as parchment after the bleeding. The physician prescribes a diet of barley gruel and watered wine, claiming rich foods inflame the humours. Agnes sneaks Thomas a bit of honey, whispering, "Don't tell the fancy man." Her small rebellion is a reminder of the human touch humoralism lacks. Godfrey's charts don't account for kindness, but Agnes knows a smile can be medicine too. The day drags on, and Thomas's condition stalls. No worse, but no better. Godfrey, unfazed, plans to try cupping next, using heated glass to draw bad humours to the skin. The villagers nod, impressed by the theatrics, but Agnes wonders if Thomas just needs rest, not rituals. Medieval medicine is a gamble, with stakes higher than a tavern dice game. Some recover despite the purges, others don't. Thomas's eyes, still darting, hold secrets nobody can unlock. Maybe he's mourning a loss, or maybe that fairy ring from last section really did spook him. Remember that mushroom mishap? Either way, the village waits, their hope as fragile as a candle in the wind. Godfrey's presence shifts the village's rhythm. The marketplace hums with gossip, and children mimic his pompous walk, earning giggles and scolds. Mental health, though unnamed, is a shared burden here. Every family knows someone who's touched, a sister who weeps too much, a father who rages at shadows. Godfrey's arrival makes it public, a spectacle, but also a chance to learn. The villagers pepper him with questions. Why does old Maud sing to the stars? Is young Will's temper a humour or a hex? Godfrey answers with jargon, but his confidence soothes them. Knowledge, even half-baked, feels better than fear. The quirky horoscopy habit sticks in the mind, though. Imagine Godfrey, nose wrinkled, holding that flask like it's a crystal ball. It's absurd, but it's their science, as real to them as an MRI is to us. Agnes, ever practical, sticks to her herbs, brewing a fresh batch of lavender for Thomas's nerves. She's not against Godfrey's methods, she's just not holding her breath. Her hut, with its herb-scented air and crackling fire, feels safer than the physician's cold logic. She hums to Thomas, her voice a soft ASMR thread, weaving calm into the chaos. As night falls, the village settles, the marketplace emptying like a stage after a play. Godfrey retires to the tavern, sipping ale and scribbling notes. Agnes stays with Thomas, her candle burning low. The humoral theory, for all its flaws, gives people a map to navigate madness, a way to name the unnameable. Thomas's silence remains, but his hand brushes Agnes's, a flicker of connection. Maybe the herbs, the bleeding, or just time will help. For now, the village holds its breath. Their faith split between a physician's blade and a healer's heart. The village square hums with a restless quiet as the sun climbs, a pale disk veiled by clouds that seem to cling to the rooftops like doubts. Thomas, still silent, sits by Agnes's hearth, his gaze fixed on the embers as if they hold answers his lips can't form. Master Godfrey's purges and bleedings, remember that flask of blood, dark as sin, have left him frail, and the villagers' hope in the physician sours like milk left too long in the sun. Now Father Edmund, the priest, steps forward, his robes brushing the dirt as he declares Thomas's affliction might not be humoral at all, but a matter of the soul. The church bells toll, heavy and slow, calling the faithful to vespers, and the air grows thick with the scent of incense and unspoken fears. In medieval Europe, where faith is both shield and sword, mental turmoil often wears a spiritual mask, blurring the line between saintly vision and sinister madness. The mainstream historical fact is that the medieval church wields immense influence over how mental health is understood, often framing it as a spiritual battle. Madness can signal divine favour, a mystic's visions like those of St. Hildegard, or demonic possession, a soul hijacked by Satan's minions. Father Edmund leans toward the latter for Thomas, noting his silence began after a late-night walk near the churchyard where ghosts are said to linger. The priest proposes a ritual of prayer and fasting to cleanse Thomas's spirit, a common practice when herbs and lancets fail. The villagers, raised on sermons of heaven and hell, nod solemnly, though some whisper that Thomas might be a holy fool, touched by God rather than the devil. Here's the quirky tidbit. To test for possession, Father Edmund sprinkles holy water on Thomas's brow, watching for a flinch or hiss, straight out of a medieval horror flick. Some priests, it's said, even use relics, like a saint's knucklebone, to provoke a reaction from demons. Thomas stays still, his eyes distant, but the villagers gasp when a drop of water rolls down his cheek like a tear. Is it a sign? A trick of the light? Even Edmund hesitates, his rosary clicking softly in his hands. Agnes, hovering in the doorway, bites her tongue. She's seen too many signs blamed on spirits when hunger or grief was the real culprit. Historians still argue whether the church's spiritual lens helped or harmed those like Thomas. Some say its rituals offered comfort, a sense of meaning in a chaotic world. Others argue it stigmatized the afflicted, turning suffering into sin. Father Edmund, though, is a man of his time, his faith as unyielding as the stone church behind him. He gathers the villagers in the nave, their breath fogging in the chilly air, and leads a chant in Latin, the words rolling like waves over Thomas, who sits slumped on a bench. The scene is eerie, lit by flickering candles that cast shadows like dancing spirits, and the villagers' voices waver between hope and fear. The church's wooden beams creak overhead, and the stained glass, crude but glowing, paints Thomas's face in reds and blues. Agnes, practical as ever, slips him a crust of bread, defying Edmund's fasting order. She's no heretic, but she knows an empty stomach doesn't help a troubled mind. The villagers, packed shoulder to shoulder, clutch charms beneath their cloaks, bits of bone, dried herbs, even a hare's foot like the one Godfrey carries. Faith and folklore tangle here, as natural as the ivy choking the church walls. Some pray for Thomas's soul, others mutter about the fairy ring. Yep, that mushroom circle's still haunting the gossip, wondering if pixies, not demons, stole his voice. Time for a joke to cut the tension. Why did the medieval priest love candles? They kept his sermons lit. Okay, that's cheesier than a wheel of Gouda, but it fits the mood. The candlelight softens the church's starkness, and Edmund's voice, deep and rhythmic, has an ASMR quality, lulling even the fidgety children. He speaks of Saint Dymphna, patron saint of the afflicted mind, whose shrine in far-off Flanders draws pilgrims seeking miracles. Thomas, though, is no pilgrim, just a boy caught in a storm nobody understands. Edmund's ritual isn't about curing him, not really. It's about naming the unnameable, giving the village a story to cling to. The priest's next move is bolder. He anoints Thomas with oil, tracing a cross on his forehead and whispering words meant to banish evil. The villagers watch, breathless, as if expecting Thomas to scream or sprout wings. Nothing happens, but the silence feels heavier, like a held breath. Medieval faith doesn't demand proof, only belief, and Edmund's certainty steadies the crowd. Agnes, though, sees Thomas's trembling hands and wonders if he's just scared. Fear, she knows, can lock a tongue tighter than any demon. She hums softly, her tune a faint echo of the one she used by her hearth, hoping it reaches him through the Latin haze. Outside, the village feels paused, the forge still cold, the marketplace half empty. Mental health, or its absence, ripples outward, touching everyone. The baker's boy, who once teased Thomas, now avoids his gaze. The miller's wife brings Agnes a loaf, a quiet apology for her ghost stories. The church's role is to unify, to weave these threads into a tapestry of faith, but it also divides, saint or sinner, saved or damned. Thomas caught in the middle is neither, just a boy whose mind has wandered where no prayer can follow. Edmund's ritual, for all its pomp, is a guess, like Agnes's herbs or Godfrey's bleedings. Another joke, because we need it. What's a medieval saint's favourite game? Halo toss? All right, I'm scraping the barrel, but the point stands. Saints like Dymphna loom large, their story's a lifeline for the desperate. The church keeps relics of her, bits of bone or cloth, said to heal the mad. Edmund doesn't have relics, just faith, but he's undeterred. He plans a vigil, asking the villagers to pray through the night, their voices a shield against whatever haunts Thomas. Some grumble, ploughing waits for no one, but most stay, their loyalty to the boy stronger than their doubts. The vigil stretches into the small hours, the church a cocoon of murmurs and candlelight. Thomas dozes, his head on Agnes's shoulder, and she wonders if sleep is his only escape. Medieval minds don't name trauma, but they feel it. War, plague, loss, all as common as rain. Maybe Thomas saw something in that churchyard, or maybe his heart cracked under life's weight. The church calls it sin or possession, but Agnes sees a boy, not a battlefield. Her hand rests on his, light as a whisper, and she hums, her voice threading through the prayers like a river through reeds. The quirky holy water test lingers in the air, a reminder of how faith shapes perception. Some villagers swear Thomas flinched, proof of demons. Others saw nothing but a tired boy. Edmund, diplomatic, calls it a step toward clarity, but his eyes betray worry. The church's power lies in its stories, and Thomas's silence challenges them all. Is he a saint in waiting, like the mystics who see angels, or a soul lost to darkness? The villagers, weary but stubborn, keep praying, their voices a soft drone that lulls even the skeptic. As dawn nears, the vigil winds down, the candles guttering like tired eyes. Edmund blesses Thomas, his voice softer now, less certain. The villagers disperse, their faces etched with fatigue and hope. Agnes stays, her basket of herbs at her feet, ready to try again when the sun rises. The church's role in mental health is a double-edged sword, comfort for some, judgment for others. Thomas, still silent, is a mirror, reflecting the village's fears and faiths. The bells toll, faint and far, and the world turns, carrying its mysteries into the light. The village huddles under a moonless sky, the air sharp with the bite of late autumn. Thomas, still wordless, lingers in Agnes's hut, his shadow long and thin against the wattle and daub walls, where the fire's glow dances like a restless spirit. Father Edmund's prayers, remember that vigil, all chants and candlelight, have faded into whispers, but they've left no mark on the boy's silence. The villagers, their hope in herbs and holy water dimming, now turn to darker explanations. By the tavern's hearth, where ale loosens tongues, they murmur of demons, their voices low as if the shadows might overhear. Tonight, Edmund plans an exorcism, a ritual to chase whatever evil they believe grips Thomas's soul. The churchyard, damp and silvered by frost, becomes a stage for a battle no one can see, and the villagers gather, their breath fogging like ghosts in the chill. The mainstream historical fact is that exorcisms are a cornerstone of medieval responses to mental distress, especially when other remedies fail. The Church, wielding authority over the spiritual realm, sees madness as a possible sign of demonic possession, particularly in cases like Thomas's, where silence and strange behaviour defy explanation. Exorcisms, rooted in biblical stories of Christ casting out demons, involve prayers, holy relics, and commanding words to expel evil spirits. Edmund, his face lined with the weight of his task, prepares a circle of candles in the church, their flames trembling as he recites from a worn psalter. Thomas sits at the centre, his eyes darting, less a participant than a prop in this sacred drama. Here's the quirky tidbit. Some priests, to confirm possession, would hide a relic, a splinter of a saint's bone, say, under the afflicted's chair, believing demons would recoil at its presence. Edmund tries this, slipping a fragment of St. Dymphna's cloth beneath Thomas's bench, watching for a twitch or cry. Nothing happens, but the villagers, packed into the pews, lean forward, their faces a mix of dread and fascination. Agnes, standing at the back, her arms crossed, wonders if the boy's just tired of being poked and prodded. Her herbs didn't work, nor did Godfrey's bleedings, but this feels like theatre, not healing. Historians still argue whether exorcisms offered solace or stoked fear. Some say they gave communities a way to confront the unknown, a ritual to tame chaos. Others argue they deepened stigma, branding the afflicted as vessels of evil. Edmund, though, is all in, his voice rising and falling like a tide, calling on angels to drive out the darkness. The church smells of wax and myrrh, the air heavy with expectation. Thomas, pale as the moon, sits still, his hands knotted in his lap. The villagers clutch crosses and charms. Remember that hare's foot from Godfrey's pocket? Their faith a fragile shield against the night's uncertainties. The ritual begins with a chant, the Latin words rolling like stones down a hill. Edmund sprinkles holy water, the same kind he used last section, but now with a fiercer purpose. He commands any demon to name itself, his voice sharp enough to cut through the gloom. The villagers gasp when a candle flickers, not from a demon, but a draught, though try telling them that. Agnes, her lips pursed, watches Thomas's face for signs of fear, not possession. She's seen grief lock a person away, no spirits needed, but the church's lens is narrower. To Edmund, this is a war, and Thomas is the battlefield. Let's ease the mood with a joke. Why did the medieval exorcist love his job? He always got to raise some spirits. Okay, that's flimsier than a monk's vow of silence, but it fits. The candles burn low, their wax pooling like tears, and Edmund's voice grows hoarse. He waves a crucifix, its silver catching the light, and asks Thomas to repeat a prayer. The boy's lips don't move, but his eyes meet Edmund's, and for a moment the priest falters. Is it defiance, despair, or just exhaustion? The villagers, restless, shift in their seats, their whispers a soft buzz like bees in a hive. The exorcism drags into the night, the church a cocoon of flickering light and murmured prayers. Edmund tries another tactic, reading from the Gospel of Mark, where Jesus casts demons into swine. The story's meant to inspire, but to modern ears, it's as wild as that fairy ring Thomas supposedly tripped over. Agnes, leaning against a pillar, recalls her mother's tales of spirits, not demons, but restless souls lost between worlds. She doesn't buy the church's black and white view, but she knows better than to say so. The villagers, caught in the ritual's spell, see Thomas as a cautionary tale, stray too far and the devil might slip in. Another joke to keep things light. What's a demon's favourite medieval snack? Soul bread. All right, I'm not quitting my day job. But seriously, the exorcism's intensity is no joke. Edmund, sweating despite the cold, places a hand on Thomas's head, his voice a low, urgent hum, like the ASMR cadence we're aiming for. He commands the demon to leave, but Thomas just blinks, slow and heavy, like a cat by a hearth. The villagers, expecting a spectacle, maybe a scream or a levitating boy, are disappointed but relieved. No demon means no danger, right? Or so they hope. The church's role here is to name the unnameable, to give shape to fear. Mental health, or its absence, is a mystery they can't solve, so they lean on stories. Demons, saints, divine wrath. Thomas's silence, though, resists every narrative. Maybe he's mourning, maybe he's broken, or maybe he's just done talking. Agnes, watching from the shadows, slips him a sprig of lavender, tucking it into his sleeve like a secret. She's no priest, but she knows a kind touch can do more than 1,000 Latin words. The villagers, though, want answers, not gestures, and their eyes stay fixed on Edmund. The ritual ends at dawn, the candles spent, the church air thick with smoke. Edmund declares the demon weakened, if not gone, a vague victory that satisfies no one but saves face. Thomas is led back to Agnes's hut, his steps slow, his silence unbroken. The villagers disperse, their faith shaken but intact, like a cracked bell that still rings. Agnes wonders if the exorcism was for Thomas or the village, a way to tame their fear of the unknown. The churchyard, now empty, glitters with frost, and the first rays of sun touch the gravestones, as if to remind everyone life goes on, demons or not. The quirky relic trick, hiding that saint's cloth, lingers as a reminder of how far they'll go to find answers. Some villagers swear Thomas shifted when the cloth was near, proof of something sinister. Others saw nothing but a tired boy. Edmund, pragmatic, calls it a step toward grace, but his hands tremble as he packs away his psalter. The Church's power is in its certainty, but madness defies even that. Agnes, back in her hut, brews chamomile, her voice a soft hum as she sits by Thomas. She doesn't believe in demons, but she believes in him, and that's enough for now. The village, waking to a new day, carries the weight of the night's ritual. The forge stays cold, the marketplace subdued. Mental health, though unnamed, shapes their world. A neighbour's odd laugh, a child's endless tears. They don't have therapy or diagnoses, just faith and fear, woven together like threads in a tapestry. Thomas, still silent, is a mirror, reflecting their hopes and dread. Agnes, her basket of herbs at her side, keeps watch, her heart as steady as the fire she tends. The church bells ring, soft and distant, calling the world back to order, even if Thomas's mind remains a mystery. The village exhales into a brittle morning, the frost clinging to rooftops like a memory of last night's failed exorcism. Thomas, still mute, huddles by Agnes's fire, his eyes tracing the smoke as it curls toward the thatch. Father Edmund's candlelit ritual, remember that relic tucked under the bench, has left the villagers uneasy, their whispers now tinged with resignation. Herbs, bleedings, and prayers have all faltered, and talk turns to a new solution, sending Thomas to the monastery a day's walk away, where monks are said to shelter the mad. The church bell tolls, its note lingering like a question, and the air carries the damp scent of earth and fallen leaves. In medieval Europe, where madness baffles both healer and priest, monasteries often become the last refuge, their stone walls promising care or confinement for minds that wander too far. The mainstream historical fact is that monasteries, especially Benedictine ones, serve as early precursors to asylums, offering shelter to those deemed insane. These religious houses, with their routines of prayer and labour, provide food, bed, and a semblance of order for the afflicted, though care varies widely. Some monks, trained in basic medicine, tend to the sick. Others see madness as a spiritual failing, best met with discipline. The monastery near the village, St. Cuthbert's, is known for its herb garden and a kindly abbot, but also for its locked cells, where the violently mad are kept. Agnes, packing a satchel with bread and lavender for Thomas's journey, wonders if the monks will help or simply hide him away. Here's the quirky tidbit. Some monasteries use mad stones, smooth river rocks blessed by a saint, to calm the afflicted, pressing them to the forehead like a medieval stress ball. The monks at St. Cuthbert's swear by a stone said to hold St. Cuthbert's blessing, claiming it soothes restless minds. Agnes, hearing this from a passing pilgrim, rolls her eyes. She's had enough of holy trinkets after Edmund's relic stunt. But she slips a pebble from the river into Thomas's hand, just in case, her fingers brushing his with a warmth that says more than words. The villagers, gathered to see him off, clutch their own charms, their faces a mix of pity and relief. Historians still argue whether monasteries helped or harmed the mentally ill. Some say their structured life offered stability, a prototherapy of sorts. Others point to neglect or harsh treatment, with some monks chaining the violent to walls. The decision to send Thomas rests with his father, the blacksmith, whose broad shoulders sag under the weight of it. He agrees, hoping the monk's prayers will do what Agnes's herbs and Edmund's exorcism couldn't. The journey begins at dawn, with Thomas led by a monk named Brother Anselm, a wiry man with kind eyes but a limp that slows their pace. The village watches them go, the forge still silent, its absence a wound in the daily hum. The path to St. Cuthbert's winds through a forest, the trees bare and clawing at a sky heavy with clouds. Anselm hums a psalm, his voice a soft thread in the quiet, while Thomas shuffles beside him, his gaze on the ground. The monk carries a staff and a sack of provisions, including a vial of holy water. Old habits die hard after Edmund's rituals. Agnes's lavender sprig peeks from Thomas's sleeve, a callback to her care, and Anselm notices, his smile faint but approving. Medieval monasteries aren't just spiritual havens, they're practical too, growing herbs and brewing remedies much like Agnes does. But their lens is divine, seeing Thomas's silence as a riddle God alone can solve. Let's lighten the mood with a joke. Why did the monk love his monastery? It had the best self-esteem. Okay, that's flimsier than a novice's vow, but it fits. The monastery's walls, when they finally appear, are grey and moss-streaked, rising like a fortress against the world's chaos. Anselm leads Thomas through a gate, where the air shifts, heavy with the scent of beeswax and damp stone. The courtyard buzzes with monks at work, tending gardens, copying manuscripts, or praying in neat rows. Thomas, overwhelmed, grips his pebble, and Anselm guides him to the infirmary, a low building where the sick and mad are kept. The infirmary is dim, lit by slits of light that stripe the floor like bars. Straw pallets line the walls, some empty, others holding figures who moan or stare. A monk named Brother Leo, the infirmarian, greets them, his hands stained with herb paste. He examines Thomas, noting his silence and darting eyes, and mutters about melancholy of the soul. Like Godfrey's humoral theory, the monks blend medicine with faith, but their remedies lean toward rest and prayer over purges. Leo offers Thomas a bed and a bowl of pottage, his voice gentle, like the ASMR hum we're aiming for. Anselm, watching, wonders if the boy's silence is a burden or a gift. A question the monks often ask. Another joke, because we need it. What's a monk's favourite herb? Praesley! All right, I'm not joining the choir with that one, but seriously, the monastery's herb garden is a marvel, its beds bursting with mint, valerian, and that St. John's wort Agnes tried. Leo brews a tea, hoping it'll coax Thomas's voice. But he's cautious. Unlike Godfrey's reckless bleedings, the monks know plants can harm as much as heal. Thomas sips, his hands steadying, and Leo watches, his face a map of wrinkles and hope. The monastery's care is slow, less spectacle than Edmund's exorcism, but it's rooted in a belief that every soul matters, mad or not. The monks' day revolves around prayer, the bells calling them to matins, lauds and vespers like a heartbeat. Thomas, excused from labour, sits in the chapel, the chants washing over him like a tide. The routine is meant to anchor, to give shape to minds that drift. But the mad aren't always welcomed. Some monks fear their presence disrupts the holy order. A few, like Leo, argue for compassion, citing Christ's care for the afflicted. The monastery, then, is a paradox, a sanctuary that can feel like a prison, its care as varied as the men who give it. Thomas, caught in this tension, is a shadow, present but apart. The quirky Madstone idea resurfaces when Leo presses the blessed rock to Thomas's brow, murmuring a prayer. The boy doesn't flinch, but his breathing slows, maybe from the stone's coolness, maybe from Leo's calm. Agnes would scoff, but she'd approve of the kindness. The monks, like her, work with what they have: faith, herbs, and a stubborn hope. Mental health, though unnamed, is their burden too. They've seen knights ranting after battle, widows weeping without end, and boys like Thomas locked in silence. They don't have diagnoses, just stories, possession, sin, or divine mystery. The monastery's rhythm soothes, but it can't erase the world's weight. Thomas's pallet is near a man who mutters to unseen spirits, his voice a jagged edge in the night. Leo checks on them, his lamp a soft glow, and wonders if Thomas's silence is a shield. Medieval life, plague, war, hunger, breaks minds as easily as bodies, and the monks know it. They don't talk trauma, but they see its scars. Thomas, maybe, carries one from that churchyard walk, or the fairy ring the villagers still gossip about. Leo, practical like Agnes, focuses on the now, food, rest, and a prayer for peace. As days pass, Thomas settles, his eyes less wild, though his voice stays lost. The monks patient don't push. Their care a slow burn like a fire banked for the night. The village far off moves on, the forge relit by another hand. Agnes, brewing her teas, thinks of Thomas, her lavender sprig a thread tying them still. The monastery's walls hold him, but his mind roams, a mystery no stone or psalm can solve. The bells ring, soft and steady, and the world turns, carrying its broken souls toward whatever light they can find. The monastery's bells hum softly, their echo fading into the dusk as St. Cuthbert settles into its evening rhythm. Thomas, still silent, lingers in the infirmary, his pebble from Agnes. Remember that river-worn gift? Clutched like a talisman. The monk's prayers and madstones haven't unlocked his voice, but they've given him a fragile calm, a pause in the storm of his mind. Meanwhile, beyond the monastery's walls, in a bustling market town nearby, a different figure dances through the chaos of a lord's feast. His name is Wat, a court jester. His motley coat jingling with bells that mock the solemn toll of church bells. His painted grin hides a tremor, a secret the crowd doesn't see. Wat's jests are a mask for a mind that frays like old cloth, and in medieval Europe, where laughter and madness share a thin line, jesters like him walk a tightrope between mirth and misery. The mainstream historical fact is that court jesters, often called fools, are a fixture in medieval courts, employed to entertain with wit, acrobatics, and biting humour. Beyond their jests, though, they're complex figures. Some are physically or mentally different. hired as much for their oddity as their talent. Wat, with his quick tongue and quicker feet, is a natural fool, his quirk seen as God-given for the Lord's amusement. But his sleepless nights and racing thoughts, hidden behind his cap and bells, hint at a deeper struggle. The court, drunk on wine and spectacle, doesn't care to look closer. They laugh as Wat juggles apples and insults, blind to the pain that fuels his performance. Here's the quirky tidbit. Some jesters, it's whispered, carry a fool's stone, a polished bit of quartz or agate, believed to sharpen wit or ward off melancholy. Wat keeps one in his pocket, a gift from a long-dead mentor, rubbing it when the laughter feels hollow. Tonight, as he spins through the great hall, his bells jingling like a warning, he grips the stone, hoping it'll steady his racing heart. The Lord's guests roar at his antics, a pratfall, a bawdy rhyme, but Wat's eyes dart, searching for an exit that isn't there. The monastery's calm is a world away, and Wat, like Thomas, is trapped in a mind that won't rest. Historians still argue whether jesters were empowered by their role or exploited for it. Some say their license to mock gave them freedom rare for commoners. Others argue they were mocked in turn, their struggles turned into spectacle. Wat, tumbling across the hall's rushes, feels both. King for a moment, prisoner the next. The Lord, a barrel-chested man with a laugh like thunder, tosses Wat coin, but his gaze lingers as if sensing something off. Wat covers it with a jest, comparing the Lord's beard to a hedgehog's quills, and the hall erupts. The fool's stone stays in his pocket, its weight a small anchor in a sea of noise. The feast is a riot of colour and scent, roast boar steaming, candles dripping wax, minstrels strumming tunes that clash with Wat's bells. The hall's tapestries, woven with knights and dragons, seem to watch him, their threads glinting in the firelight. Wat's performance is a dance of survival. Too dull, and he's out of a job, too sharp, and he risks a whipping. His mind, though, is a tangle. Thoughts dart like minnows, some bright, some dark. He's learned to hide it, to weave his restlessness into jests, but tonight it's harder. The wine flows, the crowd blurs, and Wat feels like he's juggling his own soul, one wrong move from dropping it. Let's lighten the mood with a joke. Why was the jester bad at secrets? His bells always gave him away. Okay, that's shakier than Wat's balance on a bad day, but it fits. His bells, sewn to his coat, jingle with every step, a sound as relentless as his thoughts. The court loves it, but Wat sometimes wishes for silence, like Thomas's quiet in the monastery. He's heard of the boy. Gossip travels faster than a lord's horse, and wonders if silence is a choice or a cage. Wat's own cage is noise, the constant demand to perform, to be the fool who never falters. The night deepens, and Wat's act grows bolder. He mimics the Lord's steward, puffing out his chest and barking orders, earning gasps and guffaws. But his heart races, his breath short, and he ducks behind a tapestry to catch it. The fool's stone, cool in his palm, helps a little, like Agnes's lavender did for Thomas. Medieval folk don't name anxiety or mania, but they feel it. Jesters most of all. Their role a pressure cooker for minds already stretched. Wat's mentor taught him to laugh through it, to make pain a punchline, but some nights the mask slips, and he's just a man, not a fool. Another joke, because we're keeping it cosy. What's a jester's favourite dance? The fool trot. All right, I'm not headlining the court with that one. But Wat's dancing now, spinning through the hall, his bells a frantic chorus. The crowd cheers, blind to the sweat on his brow, the tremor in his hands. The Lord's daughter, a girl with sharp eyes, watches closer, her smile fading. She's seen Wat before, late at night, pacing the courtyard, muttering to the stars. She doesn't speak, but her gaze is a question, one Wat dodges with a cartwheel and a quip about her suitors. The court's world is a stage, and Wat's role is clear. Make them laugh, keep them distracted. Mental health, though unnamed, shadows every jest. Other fools, Wat knows, have cracked. Some vanish, some turn bitter, some end up in monasteries like St. Cuthbert's, their bells traded for prayers. The church, with its demons and saints, looms large, just as it did for Thomas's exorcism. Wat's never faced a priest's rituals, but he's felt their judgment, their whispers of unnatural when his jests cut too deep. He wonders if Thomas's silence is a kind of freedom, a way to escape the world's demands. The feast winds down, the hall emptying as servants clear trenchers and snuff candles. Wat, alone by the dying fire, pulls his fool's stone from his pocket, its surface catching the ember's glow. He thinks of the monastery of Thomas, of the quiet he'll never know. The Lord's daughter lingers, offering him a cup of watered wine, her voice soft, almost ASMR-like, asking if he's well. Wat grins, deflects with a rhyme, but her kindness stings, a reminder of what he hides. The court sees the fool, not the man, and what keeps it that way, his pain buried deeper than a dragon's hoard. The quirky fool's stone, like the mad stone in the monastery, is a small rebellion against despair. Wat doesn't believe it holds magic, but its weight grounds him, a tether when his mind spins. The court, oblivious, moves on to the next feast, the next jest. Mental health, in this world, is a private battle, fought in the shadows of laughter or silence. Wat, like Thomas, carries his unseen, his bells a mask as much as a tool. The night settles, the hall quiet, and Wat paces the courtyard, his stone in hand, his thoughts a jumble of mirth and melancholy. Back at St. Cuthbert's, Thomas sleeps, his pebble nearby, a faint echo of Wat's stone. The monastery and the court, worlds apart, share this. They hold men whose minds bend under life's weight, their struggles unnamed but real. Agnes's lavender, the monk's prayers, Wat's jests. All are gropes in the dark, trying to light a path no one understands. The stars wheel above, cold and distant, and Wat, like Thomas, keeps moving. His bells a soft chime in the night, carrying him toward another dawn, another mask. The market town wakes to a drizzle, its cobbles slick and gleaming like the scales of some slumbering beast. Wat, the jester, has slipped away from the Lord's hall, his bells muffled under a borrowed cloak, seeking a moment's quiet before another night of forced mirth. His fool's stone, remember that quartz he clutches, rests heavy in his pocket, a small weight against the chaos in his mind. Meanwhile, in the monastery of St. Cuthbert's, Thomas's silence holds firm, his pebble from Agnes a silent companion on his pallet. But beyond these shadowed lives, in the scriptoriums and taverns of medieval Europe, another voice emerges, the poet, whose verses weave melancholy into beauty, turning pain into art. In a candlelit chamber above a noisy inn, a woman named Marjorie scratches quill to parchment. Her words a delicate veil over a heart that aches like Wat's and Thomas's, her sadness both a burden and a muse. The mainstream historical fact is that medieval literature, from the writings of mystics like Julian of Norwich to the ballads of troubadours, often elevates melancholy to a noble state. Influenced by humoral theory, poets and scholars see an excess of black bile not just as madness, but as a wellspring of insight, a temperament suited to deep thought. Marjorie, a widow with a knack for verse, pens lines about a heart drowned in starless tides, her melancholy framed as a spiritual quest, though the townsfolk whisper she's half-mad herself. Her poems, read aloud in taverns, stir sighs and nods. People feel the beauty but shy from its source, fearing her intensity marks a mind too close to breaking. Here's the quirky tidbit. Some poets, it's said, sleep with a sprig of rue under their pillow, believing it sharpens their dreams and wards off the despair their verses court. Marjorie keeps a dried rue twig by her bed, its bitter scent a nightly ritual, much like Wat's stone or Thomas's pebble. Tonight, as she writes, her quill pauses, her eyes tracing the inn's rafters where shadows sway like her thoughts. She wonders if her sadness is a gift, as the scholars claim, or a curse, as her neighbours hiss. The tavern below roars with laughter, Wat's voice among them, his jests a sharper mask than her ink. And Marjorie feels a pang, knowing how pain hides in plain sight of mirth. Historians still argue whether this poetic framing of melancholy helped destigmatise mental struggles or romanticise them to a fault. Some say it gave voice to the afflicted, letting them claim their pain as profound. Others argue it set an impossible ideal, dismissing those whose suffering was less eloquent, like Thomas's. Marjorie, her parchment curling in the damp, doesn't care for debates. She writes to survive, to name the ache that wakes her before dawn. Her latest poem, recited to a tavern crowd, speaks of a knight whose heart weeps beneath his mail, a nod to the hidden pain she sees in others, from jesters to silent boys. The inn's tavern is a riot of noise. Tankards clink, a fiddler saws a jig, and Wat's bells jingle as he spins a rhyme about a goose who outsmarted a fox. Marjorie, descending to read her verse, watches him, noting the strain behind his grin, a mirror to her own. The crowd, flushed with ale, cheers Wat's antics, then quiets as she begins, her voice soft but clear, like the ASMR cadence we're weaving. Her poem unspools its images, moons, tides, broken lyres, clinging to the air like mist. The listeners lean in, some moved, others uneasy. Beauty they sense, but also a truth too raw for comfort. Wat, leaning against a post, meets her eyes, a flicker of recognition passing between them. Let's lighten the mood with a joke. Why did the poet love taverns? They always had a verse clientele. Okay, that's wobblier than a drunkard's quill, but it fits. Marjorie's verses, like What's Jests, are a performance, a way to shape pain into something the world can swallow. But the stigma lingers. Medieval folk admire poets for their depth, yet fear it too, whispering of madness when Marjorie's eyes grow too bright or her words too dark. Like Thomas's silence or Watt's frenzy, her melancholy is a riddle, and the town splits its judgment. Half see a muse, half a warning. The night deepens, the tavern's candles guttering like a weary soul. Marjorie finishes her reading, her voice fading to a whisper, and the crowd claps, some wiping tears, others shifting awkwardly. Watt, seizing the moment, leaps onto a bench, his bells a jarring encore, and mocks a courtier's love with a limerick that stings. The laughter washes over, but Marjorie sees his hands shake, his full stone clutched tight when he thinks no one's looking. She wonders what drives him, what weight he carries beneath his motley. Her own is heavy enough, grief for a lost child perhaps, or the endless grind of widowhood, but her quill lets it breathe, if only for a night. Another joke, because we're keeping it cosy. What's a poet's favourite season? Fall. It's full of metaphors. All right, I'm not winning a laurel crown with that. But Marjorie's work, like autumn, is layered with loss and beauty. She writes of melancholy as a sacred wound, echoing the mystics she's read in stolen manuscripts. The Church, ever watchful, approves such musings if they point to God, but Marjorie's stray too far, hinting at human fragility over divine plan. Like What's Jests, her poems risk crossing lines, and the local priest, another echo of Father Edmund, eyes her warily, his sermons laced with warnings against vain sorrow. Back at St. Cuthbert's, Thomas lies awake. The monk's chants a distant hum. His silence, unlike Marjorie's words or Watt's bells, offers no outlet, no mask. The monastery's routine steadies him, but his mind is a locked chest, its key lost. Brother Leo, checking his palate, notes the lavender sprig, Agnes's touch still clinging like hope, and wonders if Thomas dreams in verse or silence. Medieval minds don't name depression, but they know its weight, from poets to peasants. Marjorie's poems, read by a monk in the scriptorium, stir debate. Is her sadness holy, like a saint's, or suspect, like a witch's? The Church, like the village, loves a clear answer, but none fit. The tavern empties, its warmth seeping into the night. Marjorie climbs to her chamber, her rue sprig waiting, while Watt lingers below, his bells still. He'll perform again tomorrow, his pain buried beneath laughter, just as Marjorie will write, her ink a quiet rebellion. The town sleeps, its dreams a tangle of faith, fear, and unspoken ache. Mental health, unnamed but ever present, shapes their world. A poet's quill, a jester's jest, a boy's silence. They don't have therapy, just art and grit, a way to weave their wounds into the tapestry of life. The quirky rue ritual lingers, a thread tying Marjorie to the world's dreamers. She believes it helps, or maybe she just needs to believe. Like Watt's stone or Thomas's pebble, it's a small act of defiance against despair. The tavern's echoes fade, the night settles, and Marjorie writes one last line. The heart's sea ebbs, yet sings. Across the miles, Thomas sleeps, his silence a poem unwritten, while Watt paces, his bells a faint chime in the dark. The stars turn, cold and patient, and the world carries its heavy hearts toward dawn, where new masks wait. The market town stirs under a sky bruised with clouds, the air heavy with the threat of rain and sharper whispers. Marjorie, the poet, folds her parchment, her rue sprig, remember that dream-sharpening twig, tucked safely under her pillow, while Watt's bells jingle faintly as he ducks through alleys, dodging the morning crowd. Back at St. Cuthbert's, Thomas's silence holds like a stubborn fog, his pebble from Agnes a quiet anchor in the monastery's hum. But a darker current runs through the region now, one that twists mental turmoil into something more sinister. In a nearby village, a woman named Ellen stands accused, her wild laughter and midnight wanderings branded as witchcraft. The town square, once a place for trade and tales, now crackles with fear as mental distress fuels a hunt for witches, where the line between madness and malevolence blurs like ink in the rain. The mainstream historical fact is that the medieval period, particularly from the 14th century onward, sees the rise of witch hunts, with mental health often entangled in accusations. Behaviours we might now call mania, schizophrenia or trauma, laughing fits, visions or erratic actions, are read as signs of demonic influence or witchcraft. Ellen, A widow who talks to the wind and dances under the stars fits the mould. Her neighbours, once fond of her herbal cures, now point fingers, claiming her spells caused a cow to sicken and a child to fever. The local magistrate, spurred by church doctrine and a fearful mob, orders a trial where Ellen's oddities are evidence enough. The stake looms, its shadow long across the muddy square. Here's the quirky tidbit. Some witch trials use a bizarre test called swimming, tying the accused and tossing them into a river, believing witches float while the innocents sink. Ellen faces this ordeal, her wrists bound as the villagers drag her to the water's edge, their chants mingling with the river's gurgle. If she floats, she's guilty. If she drowns, well, at least she's no witch. It's absurd, like What's Fool's Stone or Marjorie's Rue, but deadly serious. Ellen, her eyes wide but her laughter gone, trembles as the crowd watches, their fear outweighing their pity. The priest, not Father Edmund, but a sterner sort named Father Giles, blesses the river as if sanctifying the madness of it all. Historians still argue whether witch hunts targeted the mentally ill deliberately, or caught them in a wider net of paranoia. Some say they were scapegoats, their odd behaviours easy to demonise. Others argue social tensions, famine, plague or feuds drove the accusations, with madness just one excuse. Ellen's trial, held in a makeshift court under the church's eaves, is a grim spectacle. The villagers testify she muttered to shadows, brewed strange teas, danced alone at midnight. Her defence, a plea that she's just weary in her heart, falls flat. Medieval folk don't name depression or psychosis, but they know deviance, and Ellen's quirks, like Thomas's silence or Watt's hidden tremors, mark her as other. The square is a churn of mud and tension, the crowd's faces lit by torches that spit in the drizzle. Ellen stands, her grey hair tangled, her hands tied with coarse rope. Father Giles reads from a psalter, his voice a low drone, like the ASMR cadence we're weaving, but it's cold comfort. The magistrate, a thin man with a sharper gaze, questions her about demons, pacts and spells. Ellen, confused, speaks of dreams where the wind sings, but her words twist in the telling, sounding like confessions to the crowd. A woman shouts, claiming Ellen cursed her loom. A man swears her glance soured his ale. Fear, not fact, builds the case, and Ellen's mind, already fragile, frays under the weight. Let's lighten the mood with a joke. Why did the medieval witch trial fail? The jury kept floating their verdict. Okay, that's shakier than a witch's broom, but it fits. The swimming test looming for Ellen is no joke, it's a death trap either way. The river, swollen from rain, churns like the villagers' fear, and Giles sprinkles holy water, echoing Edmund's rituals with Thomas. The church's role is central, framing Ellen's oddities as sin, not sickness. But a few in the crowd hesitate, remembering her kindness. Herbs for a fever, a poultice for a cut. One girl, barely grown, clutches a charm like Agnes's lavender, whispering a prayer for mercy. The trial drags, the air thick with damp and dread. Ellen's laughter, once a village quirk, is now proof of devilry. Medieval minds, lacking our terms for mental health, lean on stories, demons, witches, curses, to explain what frightens them. Ellen's dances, her wind talk might stem from grief, a dead son whispers say, or a mind that sees what others don't. Like Watt's racing thoughts, or Marjorie's starless tides, her symptoms are human, but the village sees only threat. The magistrate, pressured by the crowd, orders the swimming test for dawn, and Ellen is locked in a barn, her sobs muffled by the night. Another joke, because we need it. What's a witch's favourite river? The one she doesn't swim in. Alright, I'm not casting spells with that one. But seriously, the swimming test is a cruel paradox, a ritual born of fear, not reason. Across the region, others like Ellen face similar fates. Women and men whose minds stray too far from the norm. Watt, hearing of the trial while juggling in the market, falters, his bells jarring. He knows the line he walks. His jests could be called madness, his stone a charm, his frenzy a spell. He keeps performing, but his grin is tighter, his eyes scanning for accusers. At St. Cuthbert's, Thomas sleeps, his pebble a faint link to Agnes's care. Brother Leo, tending the infirmary, hears of Ellen's trial and frowns, knowing the monastery has sheltered witches before, men and women whose visions were just illness, not evil. The monks, like Agnes, blend compassion with caution, but the world outside their walls is less forgiving. Ellen's fate, like Thomas's silence or Watt's hidden pain, reflects a truth. Mental health, unnamed, is a battleground, and the afflicted are often its casualties. The river waits, its current cold, and Ellen, alone in the barn, hums a tune, her voice a ghost of the laughter that doomed her. The dawn breaks, grey and merciless, as the villagers drag Ellen to the river. Father Giles prays, his voice a steady hum, but his eyes avoid hers. The rope bites her wrists and the water laps eager or indifferent. The crowd, quieter now, watches as she's lowered in, her body sinking briefly before bobbing up. A gasp ripples through them. She floats, they say, and the cry of witch rises like a flock of startled birds. Ellen, shivering, says nothing, her mind a whirl of wind and stars. The magistrate, grim, calls for the stake, and the village turns away, their fear sated but their hearts heavier. The quirky swimming test, absurd as it is cruel, lingers as a symbol of how far fear can twist perception. Like Marjorie's rue or Watt's stone, it's a ritual born of desperation, a way to name the unnameable. Ellen's fate, sealed by a river's whim, echoes the struggles of others, Thomas's silence, Watt's mask, Marjorie's ink. The town moves on, the square emptying, but the air holds a chill, a reminder of what's lost when madness is misread. The church bells toll, soft and distant, and the world spins, carrying its wounded souls toward a horizon that offers no answers. The market town wakes to a brittle quiet. The memory of Ellen's trial. Remember that river's cruel verdict, hanging like a fog over the cobbles. Watt, the jester, moves through the morning crowd, his bells muted under a cloak, his fool's stone a secret weight in his pocket. At St. Cuthbert's, Thomas's silence clings, his pebble from Agnes a faint tether to the world beyond the monastery's walls. Marjorie, the poet, writes by candlelight, her ruse sprig a quiet ritual against the melancholy that fuels her verse. But in a cramped apothecary shop nearby, another figure labours over bubbling pots and dusty jars, her hands stained with the earth's offerings. Her name is Beatrice, a healer like Agnes, and her potions are the town's last hope for minds like Ellen's or Thomas's, where herbs offer a remedy or a risk when prayers and rivers fail. The mainstream historical fact is that apothecaries, often women working in the shadow of physicians, are vital in medieval medicine, blending herbs, roots and minerals into remedies for body and mind. Drawing on ancient texts and oral tradition, they treat melancholy, frenzy or sleeplessness with plants like valerian, chamomile, or the risky mandrake, guided by humoral theory but grounded in trial and error. Beatrice, her shop a maze of dried leaves and clay vials, mixes a tonic for a merchant's wife who weeps without cause, her recipe echoing Agnes's lavender tea for Thomas. Her knowledge, passed down from her mother, is a patchwork of science and superstition, but it's all the town has when monks and priests fall short. Here's the quirky tidbit. Some apothecaries swear by moon-bathed herbs picked under a full moon to boost their potency, believing lunar light strengthens their power to calm a troubled mind. Beatrice, sceptical but pragmatic, harvests her saint. John's walked by moonlight, her knife glinting as she cuts. She doesn't fully buy the law, too much like Ellen's wind talk, but her customers expect it, and a little theatre sells more tonics. Tonight, as she grinds the golden petals, she thinks of Thomas, whose story has reached the town, and wonders if her brew could loosen his tongue. Her shop smells of earth and promise, but danger lurks in every jar, too much henbane, and a patient sleeps forever. Historians still argue whether apothecaries advanced medicine or muddled it with risk of brews. Some credit their empirical knowledge, a foundation for modern pharmacology. Others point to poisonings, accidental or not, from misjudged doses. Beatrice, stirring her pot, knows the stakes. Her latest client, their merchant's wife, sits pale and trembling, her tears blamed on an excess of black bile. Beatrice prescribes a syrup of poppy and vervain, meant to soothe the mind, but warns her to sip sparingly. Poppy's a tricky friend. The woman nods, clutching the vial like a relic, her eyes not unlike Thomas's, darting and lost. The town watches, hopeful but wary, knowing Beatrice's cures can heal or harm. The apothecary's shop is a cave of wonders, its shelves sagging with bundles of sage, fennel and mandrake roots that look like gnarled imps. A fire crackles, its light catching the glass bottles that line the walls, each glowing like a tiny star. Beatrice moves with quiet precision, her apron stained with years of labour, her voice a soft hum like the ASMR cadence we're weaving. She questions the merchant's wife. When did the weeping start? Any dreams? Any sins? Probing for clues humoral theory can't explain. The woman speaks of a lost child, a grief that chokes like smoke, and Beatrice listens, her heart heavy. She's no priest, but she knows sorrow can break a mind as surely as any demon. Let's lighten the mood with a joke. Why did the apothecary love her shop? It was always brewing with potential. Okay, that's flimsier than a dried leaf, but it fits. Beatrice's work, like What's Jests or Marjorie's poems, is a performance, balancing hope and hazard. Her moon-bathed herbs, like the fool stone or rue sprig, are part show, part faith. The merchant's wife sips the syrup, her trembling easing, and Beatrice feels a flicker of pride until a neighbour whispers of Ellen, whose own brews were called witchcraft. The line between healer and witch is thinner than a spider's thread, and Beatrice treads it with care, her jars a testament to both skill and risk. The town buzzes with its usual rhythm, cartwheels creak, hawkers shout, Watts bells jingle in the square, but beneath it runs a current of fear. Ellen's fate has sharpened suspicions, and Beatrice feels eyes on her shop, where strange smells and late-night candles invite gossip. Like Agnes, she's a woman working alone, her knowledge a shield and a target. She visits the church, dropping a coin in the alms box, not for faith, but for safety. Father Giles, still grim from Ellen's trial, nods but watches, his psalter ever present. The church, like the village, loves answers, and Beatrice's murky brews, unlike Godfrey's lancets or Edmund's prayers, defy easy judgment. Another joke, because we need it. What's an apothecary's favourite flower? Poppiula demand. All right, I'm not mixing potions with that one. But Beatrice's poppy syrup is popular, its sleep-inducing haze a balm for restless minds. She's cautious, though, too much, and the merchant's wife could slip into a sleep too deep. Medieval medicine is a gamble, with stakes higher than a tavern bet. Beatrice keeps a ledger, scratched in charcoal, noting doses and effects, her own science in a world that half trusts her. She thinks of Thomas, wondering if her valerian could help where Agnes's lavender failed, but the monastery's walls are far, and her reach is short. The merchant's wife returns, her eyes clearer, her tears fewer. Beatrice, relieved, adjusts the dose, adding chamomile for calm. The woman whispers thanks, but her husband, a burly man with a suspicious squint, hovers, asking about witches' herbs. Beatrice smiles, deflecting with talk of humours, but her pulse quickens. Ellen's shadow looms, a reminder of how quickly praise can turn to blame. The town's fear of madness, unnamed but ever present, fuels its distrust of women like Beatrice, whose cures skirt the edge of magic. She thinks of Watt, his bells masking a similar fear, and Marjorie, her poems a quieter rebellion against the same stigma. At St. Cuthbert's, Thomas stirs, his pebble cool in his hand. Brother Leo, checking his palate, notes a faint change, less darting in his eyes, perhaps, but silence still rules. The monk's herbs, like Beatrice's, are a slow hope, less dramatic than exorcisms or trials. Across the region, apothecaries like her fight the same battle, their brews a bridge between body and mind. Mental health, though unspoken, shapes their world. A widow's tears, a jester's frenzy, a boy's silence. Beatrice, stirring her pot, hums softly, her voice a thread of comfort in the dusk, tying her to Agnes, to Thomas, to all who grapple with the unseen. The quirky moon-bathed herbs linger in the air, a nod to the mysticism that clings to even practical healers. Beatrice, like Agnes, doubts the moon's power but harvests under its light, knowing belief is half the cure. Her shop, glowing with firelight, is a haven, but also a risk, each vial a potential accusation. The town sleeps, its dreams heavy with fear and hope, while Beatrice works, her hands steady, her heart less so. The stars turn, cold and distant, and the world carries its fragile minds toward another dawn, where potions, like prayers, offer a flicker of light in the dark. The market town's clamour softens as dusk settles, its cobbles slick with evening dew, reflecting torchlight like scattered coins. Beatrice's apothecary shop glows faintly, her moon-bathed herbs, remember that starry ritual, steeping in a pot that hums with promise and peril. Far off, Watt's bells jingle in a tavern, masking his restless mind, while Marjorie's quill scratches, her rue sprig a quiet guard against melancholy. At St. Cuthbert's, Thomas's silence persists, his pebble from Agnes a small anchor in the monastery's rhythm. But beyond the town's bustle, in the rural hamlets dotting the countryside, mental health takes a different shape. Here, where fields stretch wide and gossip travels slow, communities grapple with their touched folk, some shunned like lepers, others embraced like prophets, their fates as varied as the winds that bend the wheat. The mainstream historical fact is that rural medieval communities, lacking access to physicians or monasteries, handle mental distress through a mix of folk remedies, superstition, and communal judgment. Without learned theories of humours or demons, villagers rely on tradition, herbs, charms, or exile. to manage those whose minds stray. In a hamlet a half-day's walk from the market town, a man named Hal sits by a stream, muttering to himself, his hands weaving patterns in the air. The villagers call him moon-touched, a kinder term than mad, and tolerate his quirks, believing his visions predict the harvest. But tolerance is fragile. A bad season could turn their fondness to fear, as it did for Ellen in her river trial. Here's the quirky tidbit. Some rural folk believe a fairy's touch causes madness, blaming it on encounters with otherworldly beings in glades or streams. Hal's neighbours swear he met a sprite by the water where a shimmer of light, maybe just fireflies, sealed his fate. They leave offerings of milk and bread by the stream to appease the fairies, hoping to spare others Hal's lot. It's not unlike the fairy ring blamed for Thomas's silence, a story that clings like damp moss. Hal, unaware of the gossip, laughs at the ripples in the water, his voice a jarring note in the hamlet's quiet, and the villagers watch, torn between pity and unease. Historians still argue whether rural communities were kinder or crueler to the mentally afflicted than towns or monasteries. Some say their closeness fostered compassion, treating the touched as kin. Others point to ostracism, with some driven to the woods or worse. Hal's hamlet leans toward kindness for now. They bring him bread, let him sleep in a barn, and listen to his ramblings about stars and rivers, hoping he's a seer, not a threat. But the elder, a weathered woman named Sybil, keeps a wary eye, her hand on a charm not unlike Beatrice's herbs or Watt's fool's stone. Madness, even in the fields, is a riddle no one trusts fully. The hamlet is a cluster of thatched huts, its air thick with the scent of hay and wood smoke. Hal wanders from stream to field, his mutterings a strange music under the open sky. Sybil, mixing a poultice for a sick calf, watches him, her fingers stained with nettle and yarrow. She's no apothecary like Beatrice, but she knows enough to brew teas for sleeplessness or fear, much like Agnes did for Thomas. Her remedy for Hal is simpler, a bowl of porridge and a blanket, practical acts that echo the monastery's care but lack its Latin prayers. The villagers, busy with ploughing and weaving, pause to nod at Hal, their smiles tight, their thoughts split between charity and caution. Let's lighten the mood with a joke. Why did the villager trust the fairy touched? They always had sprightly ideas. Okay, that's shakier than a cart on a rutted path, but it fits. Hal's visions, whether madness or magic, draw children who giggle at his tales of star beasts and river queens. Their mothers pull them away, crossing themselves, but Sybil lets Hal talk, hoping his words hold wisdom. Medieval rural life, harsh with toil and weather, leaves little room for theory. Humours or demons are town talk. Here, madness is a neighbour, not a diagnosis, and Hal's place depends on the village's mood, as fickle as spring rain. The stream where Hal lingers sparkles under a rising moon, its banks lined with reeds that sway like dancers. Sybil visits, her basket heavy with bread and a flask of mint tea, her voice a soft hum like the Esma cadence we're weaving. She asks Hal about his stars, listening as he spins tales of lights that guide lost souls. His words, wild but vivid, remind her of Marjorie's poems, though Hal's are spoken, not written. The village, small and tight, knows everyone's burdens, grief, hunger, or a mind that wanders. Hal's might come from a fever that took his wife, or maybe that fairy-lit stream, but Sybil doesn't judge, only listens, her care a quiet rebellion against fear. Another joke, because we need it. What's a fairy's favourite prank? Tripping folk into madness. All right, I'm not charming sprites with that one. But the fairy touch belief, silly as it sounds, shapes Hal's world. Some villagers leave milk by the stream, others avoid it, fearing Hal's fate. Like Ellen's trial or Thomas's fairy ring, it's a story to explain the unexplainable. Sybil, practical like Agnes, doubts the sprites, but sees Hal's pain, real, raw, unnamed. She brews her tea, sits by him, and wonders if kindness is enough when crops fail or whispers turn cruel. The hamlet's heart is warm, but its edges are sharp. The seasons turn, and Hal's presence tests the village's patience. A drought parches the fields, and murmurs grow. Maybe Hal's visions angered the spirits, or his mutterings cursed the rain. Sybil, her authority thinning, defends him, but fear is a stubborn weed. Like Ellen, Hal risks becoming a scapegoat, his madness a convenient blame for nature's whims. The rural world, without monasteries or apothecaries, leans on itself, and Hal's fate hinges on Sybil's sway and the village's mood. Across the miles, Thomas's silence, Watt's jests and Marjorie's verses echo the same struggle, a mind adrift in a world that demands answers. At St. Cuthbert's, Thomas stirs, his pebble cool in his palm, while brother Leo notes a flicker in his eyes, perhaps a sign of easing. The monastery's herbs, like Beatrice's brews, work slowly, but hope lingers. In the town, Wat performs, his bells a mask while Marjorie writes, her rue a shield. Hal, by his stream, laughs at the water, unaware of the village's shifting tide. Mental health, unnamed but heavy, binds them all, peasant, poet, jester, monk. Sybil, like Agnes or Beatrice, fights with what she has, a bowl, a blanket, a kind word. The hamlet sleeps, its dreams uneasy. The streams murmur a soft lullaby for Hal's restless mind. The quirky fairy touch tale, like the moon-bathed herbs or fool's stone, is a thread in the medieval tapestry, weaving fear and wonder into explanation. Hal's laughter, bright but brittle, carries over the water, and Sybil listens, her heart steady despite the village's doubts. The stars rise sharp against the night, and the world turns, its touched souls carried forward, their stories a mix of kindness and cruelty, hope and dread, as fragile as the reeds by Hal's stream. The hamlet's stream glints under a pale noon sun, its ripples catching Hal's gaze as he mutters tales of star beasts, his laughter a jagged edge in the quiet. Sybil's tea and kindness, remember that minty flask? Hold him steady, but the village's patience thins as the drought bites deeper. Far off, in the market town, Beatrice's apothecary shop hums with the scent of herbs, while Wat's bells jingle and Marjorie's quill scratches, each masking their own struggles. At St. Cuthbert's, Thomas's silence lingers, his pebble from Agnes a quiet tether to a world that feels distant. But in the courts of kings and queens, where tapestries gleam and power hums, mental health wears a heavier crown. Here, royal minds unravel under the weight of thrones, their torments hidden behind velvet and gold, their madness a secret that could shake kingdoms. The mainstream historical fact is that medieval monarchs, despite their divine right aura, are not immune to mental distress, with historical records noting figures like King Charles VI of France, whose bouts of madness included believing he was made of glass. These episodes, possibly schizophrenia or bipolar disorder, are explained through the era's lens. Humours, demons, or divine punishment. In a castle a day's ride from the market town, Queen Eleanor, a young ruler widowed by war, paces her chambers, her mind a storm of grief and paranoia. Her courtiers whisper of her sleepless nights and sudden rages, blaming an excess of choler or a curse from a rival. Her physician, a doorman named Master Roland, prescribes purges, while her chaplain prays for her soul, their efforts echoing the treatments tried on Thomas or Ellen. Here's the quirky tidbit. Some royal courts keep lucky charms, like a raven's feather or a vial of water from a sacred spring, believed to shield monarchs from mental collapse. Eleanor clutches a feather, plucked from a bird said to have circled her coronation, tucking it into her sleeve like Wat's Fool's Stone or Hal's Streamside Dreams. Tonight, as she stares from her tower, her eyes catch the flicker of torches below, and she wonders if enemies lurk in the shadows, or within her own mind. The court, glittering but tense, watches her every move, knowing a queen's instability could spark rebellion or war. Her ladies-in-waiting, silent as mice, exchange glances, their loyalty strained by fear. Historians still argue whether royal mental struggles were exaggerated by rivals to undermine power or downplayed to preserve divine legitimacy. Some say chroniclers, like monks copying tales, skewed records to fit political agendas. Others argue the stress of rule, war, betrayal, loss, broke even the strongest minds. Eleanor's court, a maze of stone and intrigue, feels the weight of her unease. Master Roland, his satchel heavy with lancets, insists on bleeding her to drain hot humours. His methods a grim echo of Godfrey's with Thomas. The chaplain, Father Simon, suggests fasting and prayer, his voice a low hum, like the ASMR cadence we're weaving. Eleanor, caught between them, feels her thoughts slip, her anger flaring at whispers she can't quite hear. The castle's great hall is a spectacle. Candles blaze, minstrels strum, and tapestries glow with threads of crimson and gold. Eleanor presides, her crown a heavy weight, her smile a mask tighter than Wat's painted grin. The courtiers, sipping spiced wine, watch her hands. Do they tremble? Does she falter? A knight, bold with youth, offers a jest, hoping to lighten her mood, but her laugh is sharp, cutting the air like a blade. The raven's feather hidden in her sleeve is her secret, a talisman against the fear that she's losing her grip. Like Marjorie's rue or Beatrice's moon-bathed herbs, it's a small rebellion against despair, a hope that something, anything, can hold her steady. Let's lighten the mood with a joke. Why did the Queen love her throne? It was her reigning comfort. Okay, that's wobblier than a castle drawbridge, but it fits. Eleanor's throne, carved with lions and saints, is no comfort tonight. Her mind races. Enemies at the border, a cousin plotting, her husband's death a wound that won't heal. Medieval royals don't name anxiety or trauma, but they feel it. Their lives a pressure cooker of duty and danger. Roland's bleedings leave her weak, Simon's prayers hollow. She thinks of Wat, whose jests she's heard in the market town, wondering if his bells hide a pain like hers. A fool's freedom, she muses, might be sweeter than a crown. The court buzzes with whispers, as sharp and fleeting as the wind. A lady-in-waiting, emboldened by wine, suggests a pilgrimage to a shrine, a cure for the Queen's melancholy. Eleanor snaps, her voice a whip, and the hall falls silent, the minstrels pausing mid-note. Her outburst, brief but searing, fuels the gossip. Madness, they murmur, or perhaps a witch's curse like Ellen's river-bound fate. The chaplain, clutching his rosary, sees demons. Roland, his humoral charts, sees bile. Neither asks Eleanor what she sees, what she feels. Her grief, her fear, are royal secrets, locked tighter than the treasury. She grips her feather, its quill a faint prick against her palm, and forces a smile, the court's eyes her cage. Another joke, because we need it. What's a royal's favourite remedy? A crownic for the soul. All right, I'm not knighted for comedy, but Eleanor's remedies, like Thomas's teas or Hal's porridge, are guesses in the dark. Roland tries a new tactic, cupping, with heated glass to draw bad humours from her skin. The burns sting, but Eleanor endures, her pride a shield. Simon, meanwhile, plans a vigil, echoing Edmund's for Thomas, hoping prayers will calm her storms. The court, like the village, craves order, but Eleanor's mind, like Hal's visions or Marjorie's tides, defies it. Mental health, unnamed but heavy, is a royal burden, its weight measured in crowns and conspiracies. At St. Cuthbert's, Thomas sleeps, his pebble a silent link to Agnes's care. Brother Leo, noting a softer gaze, wonders if the boy's silence is easing, though no words come. In the market town, Wat juggles, his bells a mask while Marjorie writes, her rue a shield. Hal by his stream laughs at the water, unaware of the hamlet's growing doubts. Eleanor, high in her tower, paces, her feather her only confidant. The medieval world, from castle to cottage, grapples with minds that wander, queens, fools, poets, peasants, all tied by a thread of unseen struggle. Roland's lancets, Simon's psalms, Sybil's tea, all are gropes for answers, as fragile as a feather in a storm. The quirky raven's feather, like Hal's fairy touch or Beatrice's herbs, is a whisper of hope in a world that fears the mind's shadows. Eleanor, alone with her thoughts, wonders if madness is her fate or her strength. Her court, glittering but cold, watches, their loyalty as fickle as the wind. The stars rise, sharp and distant, and Eleanor, like Thomas, Wat, Hal and Marjorie, carries her burden forward, her mind a battlefield no crown can conquer. The castle sleeps, its torches dim, and the world turns, its royal hearts as heavy as its humblest. The castle's torches sputter under a sky heavy with stars, their light a faint challenge to the darkness pressing against Queen Eleanor's tower. Her raven's feather, remember that coronation charm, rests in her palm, a fragile shield against the paranoia that stalks her sleepless nights. Far off, in the market town, Beatrice's herbs steep, Wat's bells jingle, and Marjorie's quill scratches, while at St. Cuthbert's, Thomas's silence holds, his pebble from Agnes a quiet tether. But beyond these shadowed lives, a different pulse stirs the medieval world. Pilgrims, their feet dusty on winding roads, seeking divine cures for troubled minds. In a roadside shrine, a woman named Cecily kneels, her hands clasped around a candle, praying for peace from visions that haunt her waking hours. For her and countless others, pilgrimage is a journey to heal the soul, where faith and desperation meet like rivers at a ford. The mainstream historical fact is that pilgrimages are a cornerstone of medieval life, with shrines like those of St. Dymphna, patron of the mentally afflicted, drawing thousands seeking miracles for ailments of body and mind. Pilgrims travel to holy sites, Canterbury, Compostela, or lesser shrines like the one Cecily visits, believing relics or sacred springs can cure madness, melancholy, or possession. Cecily, a weaver from a village near the market town, has seen things since her husband's death, shadows that speak, lights that dance like fireflies. Her neighbours, kinder than Ellen's, urge her to seek Saint Dymphna's shrine, a day's journey away, where a relic, A bone fragment, they say, might banish her visions. She walks, her pack light but her heart heavy, the road a ribbon of hope and fear. Here's the quirky tidbit. Some pilgrims carry pilgrim badges, cheap tin tokens shaped like shells or saints, believed to hold a spark of the shrine's power. Cecily wears one, a crude image of St. Dymphna pinned to her cloak, its edges worn from her nervous fingers. She rubs it as she kneels, the shrine's air thick with wax and prayer, hoping its touch will quiet the voices in her head. It's not unlike Eleanor's feather, Hal's stream, or Wat's fool's stone. A small, tangible hope in a world where minds unravel without warning. The shrine, a stone hut glowing with candles, hums with pilgrims' murmurs, their faith a fragile bridge over the chaos of their thoughts. Historians still argue whether pilgrimages offered real solace or merely fed desperation. Some say the journey's structure, travel, prayer, community, eased troubled minds, a prototherapy. Others argue false hope and grueling treks worsened fragile states. Cecily, her knees sore on the shrine's cold floor, doesn't care for debate. Her visions, bright and terrifying, have stolen her sleep, and St. Dymphna's relic is her last gamble. The shrine's keeper, a monk named Brother Tobias, anoints her forehead with oil, his voice a soft hum, like the ASMR cadence we're weaving. He speaks of Dymphna's mercy, her own mind once troubled, and Cecily clings to the story, her badge a cool weight against her chest. The road to the shrine is a tapestry of dust and devotion, lined with pilgrims, cripples, widows, the mad, each carrying their burdens. Cecily walks with a tinker named Hugh, whose son mutters like Hal, his mind touched by fever. They share bread and stories, their steps a rhythm against the earth's pulse. Hugh's son, trailing behind, clutches a badge of his own, a tiny cross, and Cecily wonders if Thomas, silent in his monastery, would find peace here. The medieval world, with its relics and roads, sees mental health as a divine puzzle, solved by grace, not medicine. Cecily's visions, like Eleanor's paranoia or Hal's star beasts, are a call to pilgrimage, a journey to mend what herbs and prayers can't. Let's lighten the mood with a joke. Why did the pilgrim love shrines? They always had relicable cures. Okay, that's shakier than a pilgrim's cart, but it fits. The shrine's glow, its candles flickering like stars, offers Cecily a moment's calm, though her visions linger. Tobias, his hands gentle, offers her a vial of spring water, blessed by Dymphna's relic, and she drinks, hoping its coolness will douse the fire in her mind. It's a ritual, like Beatrice's moon-bathed herbs or Sybil's tea, rooted in faith more than fact. The pilgrims around her, some weeping, some silent, share her hope, their badges clinking like Wat's bells, a chorus of desperation and belief. The shrine's air is thick, the scent of wax mingling with damp stone and pilgrim sweat. Cecily kneels, her eyes on a reliquary, a gilded box said to hold Dymphna's bone. The pilgrims whisper of miracles, a man who spoke after years of silence, a woman whose demons fled. Cecily, her badge pressed to her lips, prays for the same, her visions a weight heavier than her pack. Tobias, moving among the crowd, offers words of comfort, his voice a steady thread, like Agnes's hum or Marjorie's poetry. He's seen pilgrims like Cecily before. Some leave lighter, others heavier, their fates as unpredictable as the road they walked. Another joke, because we need it. What's a pilgrim's favourite path? The one to Salvation. All right, I'm not earning a halo with that one. But Cecily's path, winding through hills and doubts, is her salvation, or so she hopes. The shrine, like St. Cuthbert's monastery, is a sanctuary, but its power lies in belief, not certainty. Medieval folk, lacking our words for trauma or psychosis, lean on relics and prayers, their faith a lantern in the dark. Cecily's visions, perhaps grief's shadow or a mind's frayed edge, are her cross, and the shrine her chance to lay it down. She thinks of Hal, muttering by his stream, and wonders if a badge could calm him too. The night deepens, the shrine's candles burning low, their wax pooling like tears. Cecily stays, her prayers a soft murmur, joined by others whose minds wrestle with unseen foes. Hugh's son, curled nearby, clutches his cross, his mutterings quieter now. The journey, the shrine, the shared hope, it binds them, a fragile community of the afflicted. Like Eleanor's court, Wat's tavern, or Hal's hamlet, the shrine is a stage for mental health's unspoken drama, where faith and fear dance. Cecily's badge, like Thomas's pebble or Eleanor's feather, is her anchor, a small defiance against the chaos within. At St. Cuthbert's, Thomas stirs, his silence a wall, while Brother Leo notes a softer breath, perhaps a sign. In the market town, Wat jests, his bells a mask, and Marjorie writes, her rue a shield. Hal, by his stream, laughs, unaware of the hamlet's doubts. Cecily, kneeling, feels a flicker of peace, though her visions linger sharp as thorns. The medieval world, from shrine to castle, grapples with minds that wander, its remedies, relics, herbs, jests, a patchwork of hope. Tobias, snuffing a candle, watches Cecily, his heart heavy with her struggle, his voice a whisper of comfort in the flickering dark. The quirky pilgrim badges, like the fairy touch or moon-bathed herbs, are a thread in the medieval tapestry, tying faith to the tangible. Cecily, her badge warm from her grip, rises as dawn nears, her steps lighter, though her mind storm hasn't passed. The road back awaits, its dust a promise of home, but also of questions. Will her visions fade, or follow? The shrine, like the monastery or apothecary, offers no guarantees, only a moment's grace. The stars fade, the world turns, and Cecily, like Thomas, Watt, Hal and Eleanor, carries her unseen burden forward, her badge a small light in the vast, uncharted night. The shrine's candles flicker out as dawn creeps over the hills, painting the sky in hues of frost and rose, while Cecily, her pilgrim badge, remember that tin token, pinned tight, trudges homeward, her visions dulled but not gone. In the market town, Beatrice's herbs steep, Watt's bells jingle through another tavern crowd, and Marjorie's quill weaves melancholy into verse, her rue sprig a quiet guard. At St. Cuthbert's, Thomas's silence holds, his pebble from Agnes a faint anchor, though brother Leo notes a softer gaze, a whisper of hope. But in the stone halls of a university, far from shrines and villages, scholars bend over manuscripts, their quills racing to unravel the soul itself. Here, in a world of ink and argument, mental health becomes a puzzle of philosophy and theology, where minds like Cecily's or Thomas's are debated as battles between reason and divine mystery. The mainstream historical fact is that medieval universities, like those in Paris or Bologna, begin to explore the nature of the soul and mind, blending Aristotelian philosophy with Christian theology to explain mental distress. Scholars, often monks or clerics, argue over whether madness stems from bodily humours, demonic interference, or a misaligned soul, their debates shaping how the learned view cases like Thomas's silence or Eleanor's paranoia. In a lecture hall lit by slanting light, Master Anselm, a tonsured scholar with ink-stained fingers, posits that melancholy is a disorder of the rational soul, citing Galen and Augustine. His students, young men in drab robes, scribble notes, their quills scratching like Marjorie's, as they wrestle with questions no herb or relic can answer. Here's the quirky tidbit. Some scholars believe staring at certain gemstones like sapphires or emeralds can cool a heated mind, restoring balance to troubled thoughts. Anselm keeps a sapphire on his desk, a polished stone said to soothe frenzy, rubbing it during heated debates as if it might clarify his own soul. It's not unlike Cecily's badge or Watt's fool's stone, a small shiny hope in a world of big questions. Tonight, as he lectures on the soul's faculties, reason, will, memory, he thinks of cases like Hal's star beasts or Eleanor's rages, wondering if his theories hold water or just spill like ink on wet parchment. Historians still argue whether these scholarly debates advanced understanding or muddied it with abstraction. Some say they laid groundwork for psychology, passing the mind's workings. Others argue they were too tangled in theology, ignoring the human suffering behind the theories. Anselm, pacing the hall, his sapphire glinting, doesn't see Thomas or Cecily, only ideas, humours clashing with divine will, reason wrestling with sin. His lecture, delivered in a steady hum like the ASMR cadence we're weaving, draws nods from his students, but also yawns. The soul, they learn, is a battleground, and madness a sign of imbalance, whether in body or grace. But the real people, silent boys, weeping queens, stay distant, their pain a footnote. The university's halls are a world apart, their stone walls echoing with Latin and logic, a far cry from the muddy hamlet where Hal mutters, or the shrine where Cecily prayed. Anselm's desk is piled with manuscripts, Galen's humours, Aristotle's soul, Augustine's sin, each a map to the mind's mysteries. He cites Thomas's case, heard through travellers' tales, suggesting his silence is a retreat of the will, a soul turning inward. His students debate, is it black bile, as Godfrey claimed, or a demon, as Father Edmund feared. One bold youth suggests grief, a human cause, but Anselm waves it off, too simple for the soul's complexity. The sapphire sits gleaming, a quiet nod to the era's blend of reason and ritual. Let's lighten the mood with a joke. Why did the scholar love gemstones? They made his theories sparkle. Okay, that's shakier than a student's first quill, but it fits. Anselm's sapphire, like Beatrice's moon-bathed herbs or Sybil's tea, is a bridge between logic and law. The university, for all its learning, isn't immune to superstition. Students whisper of cursed texts or haunted cloisters, their fears not unlike the village's fairy-touch tales. Anselm, though, keeps to his texts, arguing that madness is a puzzle with a divine answer. His lecture turns to possession, citing Ellen's trial as a case of demonic melancholy, a phrase that makes his students shiver, their quills pausing. The debate heats up as dusk falls, the hall's candles casting shadows that dance like Cecily's visions. A student, citing Boethius, argues the mind can be trained to resist despair, while another, leaning on Aquinas, insists only grace can heal a broken soul. Anselm, rubbing his sapphire, steers them back to humours, suggesting a purge might align Thomas's will with God's. It's a familiar remedy, echoing Godfrey's bleedings or Roland's cupping for Eleanor, but dressed in loftier words. The scholars, like the villagers, want answers, but their tools, logic, scripture, stones, are as fragile as Agnes's lavender. Mental health, unnamed but pressing, challenges their ink-stained world as much as it does the hamlet or court. Another joke, because we need it. What's a scholar's favourite cure? A thesis for the soul. Alright, I'm not earning a degree with that one. But Anselm's theories, like Beatrice's bruise or Tobias's relics, are a stab at clarity in a murky world. He thinks of Queen Eleanor, her paranoia a rumour in academic circles, and wonders if her choler could be tamed by reason or prayer. The university, unlike the shrine or apothecary, seeks to explain, not just heal, but its answers are as tangled as Hal's star beasts. The students, their eyes heavy, copy Anselm's words, hoping to grasp what eludes even their master, the line where soul, mind, and madness meet. At St. Cuthbert's, Thomas stirs, his pebble cool in his hand, while Brother Leo notes a faint hum, his first sound in weeks. In the market town, Wat jests, his bells a mask, and Marjorie writes, her rue a shield. Hal, by his stream, laughs, the hamlet's doubts growing with the drought. Cecily, home from her pilgrimage, pins her badge to her bedpost, her visions quieter but present. Anselm, far from their struggles, closes his lecture, his sapphire gleaming as he speaks of the soul's eternal quest. The medieval world, from hall to hamlet, grapples with minds that wander, its scholars no closer to truth than the pilgrims or healers, their debates a candle in the vast dark of the unknown. The quirky sapphire ritual, like Cecily's badge or Hal's fairy touch, is a thread in the medieval tapestry, tying reason to hope. Anselm, alone with his books, wonders if his theories help or hinder, if Thomas's silence or Eleanor's rages are puzzles he'll never solve. The university's bells toll, soft and distant, calling the scholars to vespers, their voices a hum of faith and doubt. The stars rise, sharp and cold, and the world turns, its troubled minds carried forward, their stories a blend of logic, law, and longing, as fragile as a gem in a scholar's hand. The university's bells fade into a twilight heavy with the scent of ink and old parchment, their echo a faint pulse in the crisp air. Master Anselm, his sapphire, remember that mind-cooling gem, gleaming on his desk, closes his manuscripts, his thoughts still tangled in the soul's riddles. Far off, Cecily pins her pilgrim badge to her bedpost, her visions softer but persistent, while Wat's bells jingle in the market town, Marjorie's quill scratches, and Thomas's silence holds at St. Cuthbert's, his pebble from Agnes a quiet anchor. But across the medieval world, from hamlets to castles, a deeper shadow looms. Fear of the unknown, a force that shapes how madness is seen, turning troubled minds into omens or threats. In a village near the university, a man named Godwin weeps at shadows, his neighbours whispering of curses and ill stars, their superstitions a net that binds his fragile mind tighter than any chain. The mainstream historical fact is that superstition dominates medieval perceptions of mental health, often overshadowing humoral or spiritual explanations. Unusual behaviours, Godwin's tears, Thomas's silence, or Cecily's visions, are read as signs of cosmic imbalance, from angry spirits to misaligned planets. Villagers, lacking scholars like Anselm or healers like Beatrice, lean on folklore. A black cat crossing a path, a comet's streak, or a birth under a bad star could mark a soul for madness. Godwin, a cooper who once crafted sturdy barrels, now sits by his hearth, muttering about shadows that chase him. His neighbours, fearing contagion or curse, avoid his gaze, their charms, bits of iron, rowan twigs, clutched like lifelines, their whispers a chorus of dread. Here's the quirky tidbit. Some villagers believe wearing a hagstone, a pebble with a natural hole thought to ward off evil, can protect against madness caused by spirits or stars. Godwin's sister, Joan, ties one around his neck, its rough edges cool against his skin, hoping it'll shield him from the shadows only he sees. It's not unlike Cecily's badge or Anselm's sapphire, a small talisman in a world where fear fills the gaps left by reason. Joan, her hands calloused from weaving, watches Godwin with a mix of love and worry, her hagstone a prayer as much as a charm. The village, its thatched roofs huddled under a star-strewn sky, hums with tales of spirits, each one a warning to keep madness at bay. Historians still argue whether these superstitions empowered communities or deepened their fears. Some say they gave meaning to chaos, offering rituals to tame the unknown. Others argue they fueled paranoia, isolating the afflicted like Godwin or Ellen. Joan, ignoring the whispers, brings Godwin broth, her voice a soft hum, like the ASMR cadence we're weaving. She's no healer like Beatrice, but she knows her brother's tears began after a fire took his wife and child, a grief too heavy for charms to lift. The villagers, though, see omens, a comet last spring, a crow that cawed too long. They urge Joan to consult a cunning woman, a local seer who reads stars, but Joan hesitates, fearing another trial like Ellen's river ordeal. The village is a tight knot of huts, its air thick with wood smoke and suspicion. Godwin's home, once lively with laughter, is now a shadowed place, its hearth cold. Joan lights a fire, hoping its warmth will coax him back, but his eyes stay fixed on corners where shadows pool. The neighbours, passing by, cross themselves or clutch their hagstones, their fear of madness as contagious as plague. Medieval folk without words for trauma or depression weave stories instead. Curses, spirits, stars gone wrong. Godwin's tears, like Hal's star beasts or Eleanor's paranoia, are a puzzle they solve with dread. Their charms a flimsy shield against a world they can't control. Let's lighten the mood with a joke. Why did the villager wear a hagstone? To keep his wits whole. Okay, that's shakier than a rickety bridge, but it fits. The hagstone, like Joan's hope, is a small defiance against fear. She sits by Godwin, her voice low, telling tales of their childhood. Barrels rolled down hills, summers by the stream. He doesn't respond, but his trembling eases, her words a thread to a time before shadows. The village, though, grows restless. A barren field, a sick cow. Godwin's madness, they murmur, brings bad luck. Joan, like Sybil with Hal, stands firm, but her strength wanes, her hagstone no match for whispers that cut like knives. The cunning woman, old Meg, lives at the village's edge, her hut a tangle of herbs and bones. Joan, desperate, visits, her brother's hagstone dangling from her wrist. Meg, her eyes sharp as a hawk's, reads Godwin's stars in a bowl of water, muttering about Saturn's heavy hand. It's nonsense, maybe, but Joan clings to it, like Cecily to her badge, or Eleanor to her feather. Meg prescribes a charm, bury a toad's bone under Godwin's hearth, and Joan, sceptical but worn, complies, her hands muddy with hope. The village watches, some nodding, others sneering, their superstitions a tangle of faith and fear, as tangled as Anselm's scholarly debates. Another joke, because we need it. What's a superstitious villager's favourite star? The one that doesn't curse you. All right, I'm not charting constellations with that one. But the stars, to Godwin's neighbours, are a map of fate, and his tears a sign they've misread it. Old Meg's charms, like Beatrice's bruise or Tobias's relics, are a stab at control, a way to name the unnameable. Joan, back at Godwin's side, hums a lullaby, her voice a soft anchor, echoing Agnes's care for Thomas. She wonders if his shadows are grief, not spirits, but the village's fear drowns her doubts. Their hagstones and whispers a wall between Godwin and the world. At St. Cuthbert's, Thomas hums faintly, a crack in his silence while brother Leo smiles, his hope cautious. In the market town, Wat jests, his bells a mask, and Marjorie writes, her rue a shield. Cecily, home, touches her badge, her visions quieter. Hal by his stream laughs, unaware of his hamlet's growing dread. Godwin, in his darkened hut, weeps, Joan's hagstone cool against his neck. The medieval world, from village to university, wrestles with minds that falter. Its superstitions a lens that distorts as much as it reveals. Joan, like Agnes, Sybil, or Beatrice, fights with what she has. Broth, a lullaby, a stone with a hole, her love, a flicker in the shadow of fear. The quirky hagstone, like Cecily's badge or Anselm's sapphire, is a thread in the medieval tapestry, weaving hope into dread. Joan, tending Godwin's fire, wonders if her brother's shadows will ever lift, or if the village's fear will drive him out like Ellen to her river. The stars burn, cold and distant. Their light no comfort to a man who sees only darkness. The village sleeps, its dreams heavy with omens, while Joan keeps watch, her voice a whisper of care in a world that fears what it can't name. The night deepens, the hearth glows, and the world turns, its troubled souls carried forward, their burdens as heavy as the stones they clutch. The village's hearth fires dwindle as night cloaks the hamlet, their embers glowing like faint stars against the dark. Godwin, his hagstone, remember that hold pebble? Cool against his neck, sits by Joan's fire, his tears slower now, though shadows still dance in his eyes. Far off, Cecily sleeps with her pilgrim badge pinned close. Wat's bells jingle in the market town, Marjorie's rue guards her dreams, and Thomas, at St. Cuthbert's, hums faintly, his pebble from Agnes a tether to hope. Across this medieval tapestry, villages, courts, shrines and halls, communities stumble toward care, however flawed, weaving kindness, faith and fear into a patchwork for troubled minds. In this final stretch, the focus shifts to these efforts, clumsy but earnest, as people like Joan, Agnes and brother Leo grope for ways to hold their own against the chaos of madness, their small acts a candle in the medieval dark. The mainstream historical fact is that medieval communities, despite limited understanding, develop informal systems of care for the mentally afflicted, from family support to monastic shelters. Lacking formal asylums or diagnoses, they rely on kinship, charity or local healers, blending compassion with superstition. In Godwin's Hamlet, Joan is the linchpin. Her broth and lullabies a lifeline for her brother. Similarly, Agnes's lavender for Thomas and Sybil's tea for Hal reflect a communal instinct to care, even when fear, like Ellen's trial or Godwin's ostracism, threatens to unravel it. These efforts, scattered and imperfect, show a society wrestling with mental health, their methods as varied as the herbs in Beatrice's shop, each a guess at healing in a world without answers. Here's the quirky tidbit. Some villages hold moon dances, communal rituals under a full moon, believed to soothe troubled minds by aligning them with lunar rhythms. In Godwin's Hamlet, Joan organises one, persuading neighbours to circle the common, their steps clumsy but hopeful, their hands linked as they hum old songs. It's less about magic than togetherness, a way to fold Godwin back into the village's heart. The hagstone around his neck swings as he sways, his eyes brighter, though his shadows linger. It's a scene not unlike Cecily's shrine or Wat's tavern performances, a collective grasp at hope, as fragile as Marjorie's rue or Eleanor's feather. Historians still argue whether these communal efforts were acts of care or control. Some say they show genuine empathy, knitting the afflicted into the social fabric. Others argue they were pragmatic, keeping mad folk from disrupting village life. Joan, leading the moon dance, cares little for such debates. Her brother's faint smile, rare as a clear winter sky, is enough. The villagers, their feet stirring dust under the moon's pale gaze, join her. Their voices a soft hum, like the ASMR cadence we're weaving. They're wary, Godwin's tears still spook them, but the dance, with its songs and steps, feels like a spell to bind them all, a fleeting truce with fear. The hamlet's common is a patch of trampled grass, ringed by huts that lean like weary sentinels. The moon, full and silver, casts shadows that mingle with the dancers, their movements slow, almost reverent. Joan holds Godwin's hand, her grip steady, her lullaby weaving through the village's tune. The scene echoes Agnes's care for Thomas, her lavender a quiet gift, or brother Leo's patience at St. Cuthbert's, his herbs a slow hope. Medieval care, whether in hamlets or monasteries, is less about cure than presence, being there despite the unknown. Godwin sways, his hagstone glinting, and for a moment the village forgets its whispers of curses and stars. Let's lighten the mood with a joke. Why did the village love moon dances? They kept everyone lunatic-free. Okay, that's wobblier than a dancer's step, but it fits. The moon dance, like Beatrice's moon-bathed herbs or Anselm's sapphire, is a ritual born of hope, not science. The villagers, their hands linked, sing of harvests and heroes, their voices a shield against the dread that Godwin's shadows stir. Joan, like Sybil with Hal or Agnes with Thomas, knows care is a daily task, as steady as tending a fire. Her brother's eyes catching the moonlight hold a flicker of peace, and she clings to it, her hagstone a small weight against her own fears. The dance ends as the moon dips, the villagers dispersing to their huts, their breath fogging in the chill. Godwin, calmer, sits by Joan's hearth, his tears dry for now. The hamlet, like the market town or Eleanor's court, carries its afflicted with a mix of kindness and caution. Across the miles, Thomas hums at Saint, Cuthbert's, his silence cracking like spring ice, while Wat jests, his bells a mask, and Marjorie writes, her rue a shield. Cecily's visions soften, her badge a talisman, and Eleanor grips her feather, her paranoia a private war. These threads, herbs, stones, dances, weave a tapestry of care, flawed but fierce, a testament to a world that tries, even when it fails. Another joke, because we need it. What's a village's favourite cure? A group hug under the moon. All right, I'm not leading a dance with that one, but the moon dance, like the shrine's relics or Beatrice's brews, is a communal act, a way to name the unnameable. Joan, banking the fire, thinks of other villages, other touched souls. Hal by his stream, Ellen in her river. The medieval world, with its fear and faith, builds fragile bridges for minds that wander, from Agnes's hut to Anselm's hall. Godwin, his hagstone warm from his grip, sleeps, and Joan hums, her voice a thread tying him to the world. The broader picture emerges. Care, not cure, defines this era's response to mental health. Families like Joan's, healers like Beatrice, monks like Leo, they offer what they can, their efforts a patchwork of love and law. The village, its huts dark now, holds Godwin, just as Saint. Cuthbert's holds Thomas, or the court holds Eleanor. Fear, of demons, stars, or witches, lingers, but so does hope, in dances, herbs, and quiet hands. The medieval mind, grappling with its shadows, finds strength in community, however imperfect. Joan, like Agnes, Sybil, or Tobias, is no hero, just a sister, her care a candle that burns despite the wind. As the night deepens, the hamlet settles, its silence soft, like a blanket over weary shoulders. The stars, sharp and distant, watch without judgment, their light touching Godwin's sleeping form, Thomas's humming lips, Wat's trembling hands, Marjorie's inky fingers, Cecily's badge, and Eleanor's feather. The medieval world, with all its flaws, tries to hold its broken souls, its dances and dreams a fragile fight against the dark. Joan, her lullaby fading, sits by the fire, her hagstone a small weight, her heart a quiet vow to keep Godwin close, no matter what the stars decree. The fire's embers pulse, a soft heartbeat in the hush of the hamlet, where the night wraps the world like a mother's shawl. Godwin breathes slow, his hagstone resting against his chest, each rise and fall a small victory. Joan, her eyes heavy, watches the shadows soften, her lullaby a whisper now, weaving peace into the air. Across the miles, Thomas's faint hum echoes in the monastery's stillness. Wat's bells quiet in the tavern's lull, and Marjorie's quill pauses, her rue a gentle guard. Cecily dreams, her badge gleaming, and Eleanor sleeps, her feather a silent hope. The medieval world, with its herbs, stones, and dances, cradles its troubled minds, its care a tapestry of effort, flawed but warm. The stars fade, the dawn waits, and the night, soft as a sigh, carries these souls toward rest, their burdens lighter, if only for now. Sleep well, dear listeners, and let the quiet hold you close.